Oh, good morning, church. Okay. Not awake yet. It's okay. It's all right. I've only had about 4 cups of coffee since about 5 a.m., so I'm a little behind. I got to get a couple more cups in me. But we're gonna get going this morning. But let's start out with prayer. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for this opportunity to dive into your word, Father, as we discover this tidal wave of grace that you give us, Father. May it wash over us, change us, move us, and push us to share you with our communities, to share Jesus with everyone around us, our family, our friends, all of our loved ones, and those we don't even know, Father. May we be bold in your sight. It's in your heavenly name I pray. Amen. All right. So this morning we're going to get started in Romans. We're going to be in Romans 3, 9 through 26, and we're continuing on with our tidal wave of grace. So as you see, I don't know many other pastors that dress all goofy. Well, maybe a couple. But I like to get into my sermon illustrations and use myself a lot of times just because it's nicer, it's safer. So I got my Hawaiian shirt on because what do we wear to we see tidal waves at the beach, right? So we gotta wear the attire. I know Miss Pam's back there rocking her Hawaiian shirt too, and we're doing that. And then I just felt like I needed to wear my Air Jesuses today, my sandals, and of course it wouldn't be a dad moment if I didn't wear socks with my sandals. So I had to rock my sporty. But I told Grace, I said they're leather, so that makes them fancy. Right? That makes them for church. Yes? No? No? She says no. I think they're all right. Next week it's going to be even more fun because I'll have my floaties on, so y'all will be ready for that one. But this week we're continuing on with our tidal wave of grace, and we're looking here in Romans chapter 3. Now, y'all get ready because this is one of my favorite, if not the favorite books of the Bible. Romans just has a very special place in my heart. Actually, back in college when I went through the class for Romans, it just really spoke to me, really stirred, and I just love it. Paul is actually very hard to read. Even Peter writes about that. He says, hey, you know that guy Paul, he's pretty hard to understand. But once you dive into it and you break it down, it just pierces right through with the heart of the gospel. It just is really amazing. And my last paper there in that class, the instructor made a mistake in not putting a cap on the number of pages that you can write. You know, they always put a minimum on there because they try to pry out of the students, you know, at least write 3 pages. And I was like, oh, you made a mistake. You didn't give me an upper limit. So when I turned in an 18-page paper, he goes, I read the first 3. You got an A. He's like, I'm not doing the rest. I was like, come on, man. There was some good stuff in there. But there's really, really great stuff in Romans. It's just so amazing. And if you have trouble with it, it's okay. You're not alone. It is, like I said, it's very tough to read. But that's what you pay me for, and we can break it down. And you know, like I'll do it fireman style. I'll write it down in crayon for you because that's how we know and understand it. But we'll dive into this and we'll see how we can explain and discover this tidal wave of grace that comes through Romans and come through Paul's teachings here. And you might say, well, you know what? I already know the gospel. I already have heard the gospel. I already believe the gospel. But you know, I've done this for years, and honestly, I don't think I fully understand the gospel either. And every time I read it, every time I dive in, I get more. I just get more out of it. And that's good. I want more. I want to feel like I'm just being washed over and just tossed in the waves. If you've ever surfed, I tried my hand at some surfing when I was younger, and I'd rent the big longboards because I wasn't going to get the little short ones, and I'd fall on my face really, really bad. But I'd get the big longboards, and I'd get out there in the surf, and I used to just sit there and wait for a wave, and you start catching that wave, and you get a little sideways, and of course, I'd hit the sand, and then just But it was so worth it. It was just amazing and so much fun. So I kept doing it until I started watching like Shark Week too much, and then they talked about this little app you can get on your phone called a shark tracker. And so all these big sharks that they've tagged, you can go through and you can see where these sharks are. And it'll tell you what shark it is. It'll tell you the name of the shark and all that kind of stuff. It's really neat, except for there's a lot of great whites And I don't know if you know that they became a protected species in like 1997-ish. And ever since then, their numbers have grown and grown and grown around the U.S. And I started seeing these things on the tracker getting really close to shore, like around Daytona Beach and stuff, places where I would surf. And I was like, nope, I don't get in that deep anymore. I don't do it. Because I would be sitting on my surfboard, and you'd see bait fish just start going a little crazy around you. That's how you kind of know there's something near you, and you pull your feet up and just kind of sit on your board and wait patiently for it to be done. Sometimes it'd be a little fin come cruising up, and it'd be like a little bull shark or something like that. He'd just curious, cruise on by, keep going. Okay, have a nice day, shark. And, sometimes it'd be a dolphin. They come, you get the up and down motion. You're like, whoo, okay, I'm good. And they just want to see what you are. And this one day I was sitting out there, and bait fish just start jumping up and down, so I just pull my feet up, and I'm just sitting there. And I had never seen this before, but it was about this wide, and it was just this big, smooth thing that just came up and over. And then I see this big paddle of a tail come up, and it was a sea cow, a manatee. And I was like, man, I didn't know that they actually swam out there along the shorelines, which they do. But that was really neat. He just wanted to see who I was. He was like, hey, man, what's going on? I'm like, hey, Mr. Sea Cow, And I just waved by to him. But that freaked me out a little bit. That was one of the last times I surfed, just more and more of those kind of creatures. And then you see all these fishermen on the videos and stuff catching these big hammerheads and stuff on the beach. I was like, okay, I'm done. Yeah. I like my legs. I like where they're at. I like my arms. I'm going to stay where I'm supposed to be. Now, when we get into the gospel and we get into Romans, we start looking at things like these legal arguments, okay? Essentially, what Romans starts out as is a legal argument, sort of. Paul is taking, so Paul, if you don't know, he had the highest level of education that you could get as a Pharisee. So he had this high education. A lot of it was in the law. It was in the law of Moses. And so essentially, he trained at the, if you want to call it, the College of Tarsus in law. And he made an excellent lawyer because he could throw out an argument and then solve his own argument. Like, he knew what you were thinking before you ever had a question, and he just, boom, throw it out and multi-fire, and he would just kind of do that. And he does that in the first part of Romans. Like Romans 1 through 3, he kind of looks at that. And we can't really look at Romans 3 without knowing and understanding what's in Romans 1 and 2. I'll give you kind of a paraphrase there. But in verse 16 of Romans 1, it says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. And it is written, the righteous shall live by faith." Now, we've got to understand there in the first part of that, the Jews and the Greeks. What he's breaking down there is he's saying for the religious and the non-religious. Okay, and pretty much all of our population fits in those two categories, does it not? So he's saying everyone. The gospel is for everyone. This power to convert is for everyone. This power of God for salvation is for the religious and the not religious. So it's for those people who live how they want to live, don't follow any laws, but it's also for the people who go to church all the time. So it's for those people who watch rated R movies and, it's all drugs and rock and roll. And then it's also for those who have served in the church all their life and do communion. And the gospel's for everyone. It's for everyone. And what I think is neat is he kind of spends chapter 2, he kind of starts listing out these different things that, and the Bible's full of lists. I don't know if you ever see that, especially when it comes to sin. Like, they love to just throw out these lists, and Paul is kind of harsh when he starts throwing out these lists, murders and, adulterers, and you're just sitting there, eek, just kind of, yikes. But then he throws out other ones like not obeying your parents, teenagers, and everybody else here, right? And he does this so that way we can see that we have all fallen short, that we have all sinned, not just the non-religious people, but even those who have spent time in a church. And so he concludes that everyone needs Jesus, that everyone is a sinner. And it's really kind of funny when we look at some of those lists and we look at our lives and we sit here and analyze back and forth and, well, but I'm a pretty good person. Okay, well, yeah, you might be a good person because grandma told you so. Or maybe your kindergarten teacher said, you were puppy's breath and rainbows and Skittles. And, well, you know what? It's okay, Skittle, because you're still a sinner. You're still a wretched, black-hearted sinner, just like the rest of us. We all fall short. We all fall into those categories. We all still fall into that. And so when we begin here in Romans 3, after we've seen these lists and we've seen all these evidence of sins that Paul lays out there, he says, but what then? So he lays out the argument that, hey, the diagnosis is, hey, you are sinners and boom, 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 boom. But he says, then what then? This is in Romans 3, verse 9. Are we Jews any better off? And he says, no, not at all. For we have already charged that all. We have already changed that all. It's already been paid for. Both Jews and Greeks are under sin. Now, what I think is neat, if you had a spiritual passport when you were born, if you had some kind of documentation that you were born on the spiritual side, like we all have our birth certificates, but on your birth certificate, it doesn't say sinner, non-sinner, nothing like that. It would all say, for everyone, it would say under sin, right? Everyone is born under sin. We all have this inherited sin that comes from all the way back at the beginning under Adam and Eve. And, from back in the garden when they fall. And we all inherit that sin. So we're all born under sin. And he says, none is righteous. No, not one. And the people that he's talking to, like, they don't understand it. They don't get this. And he says, no one seeks for God. All have turned aside together. They have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. No one does good, not even one. So the bad news of this, and Paul's a master at this, he throws out some bad news and then he throws out some good news. But he's throwing out this bad news that it's not just that you're breaking laws, you break promises to yourself. Like I said the other week, have you been following your own promises to yourself? Oh, I promise I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do that. And then you just fall right back into it. Look at your New Year's resolutions. Have you stuck to those? I know I haven't. So you can't even keep those to yourself, but yet we think we can keep the laws. There's over 600 laws in the law of Moses that Moses got on Mount Sinai from God when he received the Ten Commandments. That was only a little piece of it. There was over 600 laws. And we think that we can keep those. That means you're going to have to keep 600 laws every single day for the rest of your life. Can you do that? I can't do that. I can't even keep the speed limit laws when we drive around, Especially come through some of these school zones like the one right here. I know Mr. Jerry loves that one. We can't. But that's okay because it's meant to be that way. See, God meant to give us all these laws so that way we could see that we couldn't keep them, that we could see on our own we could not strive in that. We could not make ourselves righteous. We can't keep them. Romans 3:13, it says, their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of asps, which I have to enunciate that one, asps. The venom of asps is under their lips. And I know if any of y'all are kind of giggling and stuff like that, I see some smiles out there. That just says that you're a sinner because you're thinking that in church about that word. I'm just kidding. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood, and their paths are ruin and misery. That's pretty descriptive of like a pretty horrible person. Right, you would think, like, and I remember my grandma said I was such a good little boy. I'm such a good boy. But when we compare good and bad, what are we comparing it to? Who are we comparing ourselves to? So yeah, sure, compared to the nightly news or to Hitler or, maybe your college roommate, sure, yeah, you're a pretty good person. But compared to an almighty, holy, and just God, no. We fall so short. We miss the mark by a mile. And so this diagnosis that Paul is throwing out here, this harsh statements, these harsh words, is to show us that it's us. We are them. We are sinners. We completely and totally set idols before God all the time. All the time. You ever set anything before God? Anything. That's an idol. It could be money. It could be stuff. It could be relationships. You ever have that relationship that you just hold up on that pedestal, when you're a teenager and you're just in love? Mom, I love him. I'm telling you. It could be anything. Cars, whatever. If it takes the place of your time with God, if it takes the place of that, I can't help but think of sports. Oh man, such a big one in our society. I love my Georgia Bulldogs, okay? I love my Georgia Bulldogs. But if I got to make a choice between them or God, I think I better be choosing right. Go Dogs. No, I'm just kidding. And so we've got to look at this as a medical diagnosis, okay? You've got to kind of look at this as a medical thing. And, if you had a broken arm, let's say, and you go to the orthopedic doctor and the doctor grabs that arm immediately, right? Because he wants to look at that arm and he starts manipulating. Ow, no, leave that alone. Look at my leg. It's perfectly fine. Here. He can't diagnose your arm by looking at your leg. It's not going to work out for you. No, he's got to look at what needs to be healed in order to heal it. And that's what God does, especially with the laws. He's looking at what we need to be healed in order to heal it. The laws that we are given, they should be a mirror. Oftentimes, though, we like to take the laws and we like to use them as binoculars, though, don't we? Like, look at all them sinners out there. No, we got to stop, right? We got to stop looking and judging other people. Instead, we got to hold that thing up like a mirror and a map. It's a map to tell us how we should live, but it's a mirror for you to look in and go, okay, I'm not living that way. Oh, there's that sinner right there in that mirror, right there. Hey, it's that guy. So that way we can understand that we need a holy and perfect God. We need a holy and righteous and just God. Somebody to save us from ourselves, not other people. So we continue on here in Romans 3:19. Now we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped, and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For the works of the law is no human being. You can kind of take that little word there and insert your name. So I could say, for by the works of Jeremy, being justified in his sight? No, he's saying you can't. You can't be justified in God's sight by the works of me. I can't. No, nothing that I do makes me justified in God's sight. Since through the law comes the knowledge of sin. So through the law, through the knowledge of the law, comes the knowledge of sin. Me as a human being, there's nothing I can do to justify this. If we look back at the original sin, and we look back at Adam and Eve, and we see this eternal problem that is created, this eternal hole. See, when Adam and Eve were created, they were created in this perfect harmony, this perfect relationship with Christ, and when sin entered into the world and it broke that relationship, it created this eternal hole in them, this eternal hole in their spirit. And that eternal hole can only be filled with an eternal thing. It cannot be filled with something that rust and moths destroy. It can only be filled with an eternal Jesus. So we have this mirror standing in front of us. But it can only show you the problem. The laws can only show you the problem. It can't show you the fix. So years ago, this was 2010, I was on Engine 10. I was a driver engineer, and We get responding to a cardiac arrest. Guy, nothing abnormal about this, pretty routine, if you want to call it routine, call. Working him, we actually get a heartbeat back and everything. We load him on the stretcher, and we're kind of in a weird spot, just a hallway, nothing crazy, nothing I hadn't done about 50 times before, but I grab the stretcher and I go to just lift it, and this was before we have the power ones. Now we got power ones, and we just press a button and watch it go zzz. It's really neat. I wish I had those. My back probably wouldn't be as bad as it is now, but not an abnormal sized guy, just a normal, about 200-pound guy, and the guy at the foot of the bed, I'm at the head of the bed, and we get it to lift, load position, and he unclicks, and then all of a sudden we hear another click and a pop, and my shoulder just goes pow, and I just, like that. And my lieutenant was standing next to me, and he's like, when somebody else hears it, it's bad. And he heard my shoulder pop. And my bicep tendon, you have two of them, the long head comes around and around back. Well, it had let loose, and it pulled the cartilage with it. And then it made just a little ball up right here. And but in the moment, your adrenaline's flowing, you just kind of shake it off. You're just like, it'll be all right. And so we just kind of meander back to the truck, and I'm one-handed. I'm pulling the stretcher up one-handed because this one's just not doing much. It's just kind of flopping in the wind. And my guys have to get on there. They got to still work the patient, and they're going to the hospital. Well, I got to drive the fire truck there and pick them up. So I'm driving the fire truck one-handed. And by the time I get to the hospital, it's just really starting to throb. It's just really like man. And I go in there, and we finish up the call and everything, and then my lieutenant's like, you need to go to the doctor. I'm like, yeah, probably. It doesn't work. It hurts when I do this. Well, stop doing that. So I go to the doctor, and I get an MRI, and the MRI doesn't heal it. I'm surprised. Not really, right? Because MRIs don't do that. MRIs just look at the problem. It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 MRIs, they're not going to heal the injury, right? It takes surgery, and it takes, the healing hand of God to eventually, now, I'm fine. It's okay. It just clicks when I do this. No, I'm just kidding. But that's what the law is. The law is the MRI. It can only examine and show you the problem. It can't heal you. For by the works of the law, no human being will be justified. That includes me. That includes you. It's just impossible. However, there's good news. Last week I was talking about the one literary term that I really like in the Bible is I like big butts. I like them. And this one right here is another one. Last week we had but God. Now we've got but now. So he just listed out all of these things that the law shows us that are so bad, and all of our sin just placed in our face like a mirror. And he says, but now the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law. Although the law of the prophets bear witness to it. This righteousness that he's speaking of, this is a right standing before God. This is not just us being good, but this is us being found perfect and just in God's sight. But it can't be manifested in us. And it's not even manifested in the law. It's manifested apart from the law, and the prophets bore witness to it. What he's saying is we have the whole Old Testament, and at this time for them it was just we have the whole Scripture from Genesis to Malachi. We have all of this that points to someone that was to come, that was to be the justification, that was to be the righteousness apart from the law. It all points to Jesus. So Paul is telling us that it is of utmost importance. It's almost as if it's the most important. Because you can't have the gospel if you don't know who brought it. You can't have the gospel if you didn't have the pointing to of who it was supposed to be about. That's what he's telling them here. I've heard some preachers, and it's disturbing, y'all. I've heard some preachers say, we don't really need the Old Testament. It's just a bunch of old laws. No, it's not. Every single one of it points to Jesus. Every single piece. From the Genesis, when we talk about Adam and Eve and the fall, and after the fall, he's speaking to Eve, and he's saying, one day from your line is going to come this person, this this Messiah, this one who is going to crush the serpent's head. And yeah, his heel's going to be bruised from getting, bit or whatever, but he's going to crush the serpent's head. He's speaking of Jesus. And then as we continue on, you think about Bible stories when you're a kid, and, we think about Moses, right? And Moses goes to Egypt to set his people free and to lead them out into the, into the wilderness, but then on the Cana. That's not what that's really about, though. What that's really about is there at the last plague, when the spirit of death was going to sweep over the land and take all of the firstborn. They were instructed to take the spotless lamb and to shed its blood and to rub it over the doorpost, so that way when the spirit of death come through, it would pass over anyone that was covered by the blood of the lamb. It speaks about Jesus. And then they have this sacrificial system they set up. This sacrificial system, they set it up in the wilderness. As they're traveling about, they used to have to tear it down and build it back up. Every time they build this temple, and this temple has layers to it. We talked about it in Sunday school. It has these courts to it where different people would stand depending on who you were. And in the middle of it is the Holy of Holies, the place where they placed the Ark of the Covenant that held the laws of God. And every year, as part of the sacrificial system, they would sacrifice. And it's very complicated and everything. If you want to look it up, it's in Leviticus 16. And they talk about, all the different things they had to do every year in order to cover the broken law with the blood of an innocent creature, with the blood of an innocent lamb. So that way every year God would, descend upon it like a throne. You had these cherubim that with their wings stretched out, and he could sit there upon it and then place his feet upon the mercy seat. But instead of seeing the broken law and instead of seeing the sins of his people, he would see the blood of the Lamb. It speaks to Jesus. And then we have the Gospels. And then we have the Messiah show up on the scene. So you have all of this through Malachi. But in Malachi, it talks about somebody else who was to herald the coming, who was to point out the Messiah, just in case we were going to miss it. But in Isaiah 53:5, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds we are healed. See, the prophets, they spoke about stuff that went on in their time. But mostly they spoke about the Messiah to come. Mostly they pointed towards this Jesus that was to come. Psalms 22. All right, David writes this psalm down, and he writes it down 500 years before crucifixion is ever invented by the Persians. Nearly 1,000 years before Jesus is ever on the earth, and he writes it down, and it is point by point the crucifixion as it happens. He writes it down in prophecy. And then Malachi, like I said, he comes along and he starts talking about this one who will bring their fathers' focus back to their sons and their sons' focus back to their fathers, and to say basically you're going to have people that are going to come back to an understanding of this prophecy, an understanding of a Messiah to come. He says it'll all be through the spirit of Elijah. And then when we look in Luke, and it's talking about Mary's cousin, Elizabeth, and she's pregnant, and the angel comes to him and says, hey, you're gonna bear a son, and he's going to have the spirit. It's going to be said about him that he'll be the spirit of Elijah. And it'll be said that what he's going to do is he's going to point the fathers back to the sons and sons back to the fathers. The prophecy gets fulfilled that Malachi speaks of. And this kid, he grows up kind of weird. He grows up a little strange. John the Baptist, if you ever looked at him, he's a little weird. He spends a lot of time out in the wilderness. He wears, some raggedy, like furry clothes, not like a fur bikini or nothing like that. But, I'm pretty sure it's probably, a little weird, probably a little smelly. Eats some weird things, some locusts and some bugs. Drinks some honey. Spends a lot of time yelling at people. That's pretty normal today, I feel like, if you walk around the streets. But back then, it'd probably get you killed. This is a weird dude. And he starts speaking of the coming of the Messiah, and he starts preaching, repent, turn. Starts baptizing people in the water. And then one day comes along, his cousin comes walking down through there, and it's Jesus. He's walking through with his disciples, and he stops everything. He stops everything he's doing. He says, stop, behold the Lamb of God. What a bold statement. What a bold statement. It points to Jesus. He comes to take away the sin of the world. Not just the sin of that year, like the lambs used to do in the sacrificial system. It wasn't just a Lamb of God just to do something for a little time. No, this was the Lamb of God. Not just for the Jews, but for the world. So as we continue on in Romans 3:22, the righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe, for there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This righteousness comes through faith, not through works, through faith. This works-based thing, this isn't new. It's not something that, we're seeing even in the last couple of centuries. No, this was from the beginning. When Adam and Eve sinned, and then all of a sudden they realized, hey, I'm naked, and I'm shameful because of what I've done. They didn't go running back to God going, oh, I'm sorry, Daddy, help me. No. They went and they hid, and then they tried to cover themselves. And this is called being self-righteous. They tried to cover up their own sin by sewing fig leaves together. They tried to cover it up. So you see, it's either by rebellion or self-righteousness, one of the two. All of it, we're still rebelling against God. Adam and Eve, when they chose the fruit, they didn't just choose a fruit. They didn't just choose disobedience. They chose a different king. They chose a different kingdom, and now we fall under that kingdom, and we're stuck in it. We're born in it. And so we have this nature, this I don't know what comes over us, but we think that we can do it ourselves. I often sit here and use other people for illustrations when I'm preaching, and I don't say names unless I usually get permission or if they're sitting in here. If you're sitting in here, you're free game. Sorry. All right? And if you know a pastor personally, okay, you're also free game to be used as illustrations. This is just how pastoral works, okay? Because if I didn't do that, if I didn't use real life, then I wouldn't have any illustrations, right? So, but when I talk about it, when I point things out, I try to keep it biblical. I try to keep it truth. And all I'm doing is reading to y'all what's in here. When it lists out all these sins, it usually hurts somebody's feelings. I usually get some kind of email, which if you want to send an email, that's fine. You can send it to jimmycrackcorn@idon'tcare.com. All right? Because it's not, I'm just speaking out what the Bible says, and we all have a certain sin that we fall under. But I often use myself more than I do others. And mine is pride. Pride, y'all. Pride. Especially as a fireman. Especially as physical as I love to be and as an athlete. You're not going to tell me I can't do that. Now with age, this is getting better because my body's telling me, hey, yeah, you can't do that. I used to be able to do back tucks, handsprings, flips, 360 kicks in the air, spinning and doing all sorts of craziness. You couldn't tell me I couldn't do it. I was going to do it. You couldn't tell me I wasn't going to drag this hose into that house and spray water on this fire and fight the beast. You couldn't tell me I wasn't going to drag that person out. I could do it. I got this. It's probably the three most dangerous words in the human language. It's I got this. It's nothing but rebellion, y'all. That's that pride. I still struggle with it. It gets me in so much trouble. It gets me in a ton of trouble. Sometimes fun trouble. I ride four-wheelers and stuff with my friends a good bit, and we love to go up in the mountains, and we'll start off on some easy trails. We'll take it easy, but then we'll see that black diamond or that double black diamond or something like that, because they rate them like they do ski slopes. So that just means really hard. And all it takes is one of us guys. You get a bunch of guys together who are, the alpha male types or whatever, and macho and just crazy and prideful like we are. It only takes one. Hey, I bet we can do that. Yes, we're doing it. And then 3 hours later, after you've gone a quarter of a mile, you're like, okay, we're done. Turn around with your tail between your legs. That's that pride, man. Gets me in trouble. Gets me hurt. Because all of these sins, no matter what it is, no matter what idol you're placing in front of God, it all is going to eventually end up in death and destruction. Every time. It's probably the reason why I have a bad back, bad neck, bad shoulders, bad knees. I tell people all the time, I've treated my body like an amusement park, but I've had fun doing it. So I feel like there's blessing and curse in that. But this righteousness, it has to come through faith. Not just a faith of believe that, but a believe in. So when he talks about this faith here and we break it down to Hebrew, it actually is pisteuo. Or sorry, that's not Hebrew, it's the Greek, sorry. Pisteuo. And so this pisteuo means a faith in, not a faith that. So we can have faith that Jesus walked on the earth and was crucified and resurrected. We can have a faith that it happened. But we got to have a faith in him. We've got to have a trust in him. And it's a very different thing. Sometimes that's hard to discover. It's almost like when you're learning to swim. Okay? Everybody in here that's over the age of 40 probably learned a whole different way to swim than somebody that's a lot younger, right? 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 Now they have swim lessons, and it's in this little kiddie pool, and the little swim lesson person holds you up and lets you paddle. Yay! It's all sorts of fun, and they're precious. Of course, they also wear helmets when they ride bikes and all sorts of stuff, you know. Bless their hearts. They're going to be okay. But us, no, man. What happened? Your grandfather usually just took you and just threw you into the pool. Good luck. Come on. Boosh. You know, and then after maybe that first initial time, you're standing on the edge of the shore or the edge of the pool or the diving board or whatever, and he's probably standing there in the pool going, okay, now it's your turn. You just got to jump now. I'll catch you. Come on. Trust me. I'm not going to let you drown. He might, but sitting there with the marble hanging out, you know, like, rah, 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 come on. You have a hard time jumping, don't you? Because I have faith that my grandfather's there, or I have faith my dad's there, but do I have faith in him that he's going to do what he says? Do you see the difference? That's the pisteuo. The pisteuo happens the moment my feet leave, the moment my feet go off the platform, the moment my feet send me over, and I have faith that it will catch me. I've been wanting to do this for a while now. Y'all don't even know. Yes, Grace. You got to have that faith in Jesus. Not just that. Not just that he was there. But a faith in. And what is that faith in? Paul continues on there in verse 24. And are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is Jesus Christ. Justification. See, we serve a just God. And so to be justified is to be declared righteous. Not because of us, Paul's saying right here, but because of Jesus Christ, because of his work on the cross. Because of his blood that is shed and it covered all of those sins we have talked about, all of those broken laws. By his grace, this tidal wave of grace is because you didn't earn it. It was given to you like a free gift. Like a redemptive coupon. You know? Like one year I won this little coupon thing for honey baked ham. Man, I love some honey baked ham, but those things are expensive. Y'all ever notice that? Those things are like $80 for a small one. Man. Well, it was for this big one, and I was like, yes. It was a radio thing, you know, you call into the radio station, oh, your caller number, blah, blah, blah. You win a honey baked ham certificate. Yes. And I take that of the honey baked ham, and I turn it in, and I redeem that coupon for that free gift. I didn't pay a thing for it. I didn't do anything for that. I didn't even have to go get it. They mailed it to me. So I didn't have to pay the postage. Nothing. And so honey baked ham, they give me the ham, and I go about my merry way. But somebody's got to pay for that ham. Somebody along the line paid for that. That company's got to front that cost. It's a free gift. That's what it means to be a free gift. Somebody else paid the cost. Somebody else paid for that. And for our sin, for this justification, for this declaration of righteousness that we now hold through faith in Jesus Christ, means that he paid it, and he paid it with all of his blood. He covered our sin with all of his blood. Not because I'm righteous, not because of anything I've done, but because of who Jesus is. So through this redemption, this price is paid. Your sin debt is wiped away. Jesus paid it all and paid it in full. This is called propitiation. You'll see that in this next verse here, Romans 3:25 and 26. Whom God put favor, after he's talking about Jesus Christ, whom God put forward as a propitiation. I'm getting tongue-tied as crazy, y'all. Whom God put forward as propitiation by his blood to be received by faith. And propitiation, what that means is a full and final payment. A payment that satisfies. Payment that what? Anyone? Satisfies. A payment that satisfies. That means it's done. End. That's all. Completely paid. This was to show God's righteousness, not our own. Because in his divine forbearance, he had passed over former sins. All washed away, all paid for. That tidal wave of grace came through, and you were washed as white as snow. It was to show his righteousness at that present time. It was to show his righteousness so that he might be just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Oftentimes, people talk about the wrath of God, and they look at this world, and they look at the problems, and they look at bad things that happen, and they're like, why do these bad things have to happen? Because sin is real, and because God is just. God is good, but he's just. See, he has to be perfect at the things that he is. Otherwise, he wouldn't be God. It's his nature. He has to be perfectly holy. He has to be perfectly just. He has to be perfectly good. And so when we look at this, we look at sin that broke the world, and this sin has to be atoned for, and this sin has to be paid for. If God's sitting there as a judge, as a justifier, as a judge, he has to judge that sin. And he has to put condemnation on that sin, right? If we have a judge at one of our circuit courts out here, and let's say you have an accident or something like that, or somebody does something negligent and it causes the death of somebody else, that judge isn't going to sit here and go, but you're pretty good. You're good enough. Don't worry about it. Go on back and live your life. That would not make him a good judge, would it? That wouldn't make him a just judge. He wouldn't be doing his job. So how can we expect God to do the same? Because people will be like, why doesn't God just, if he's so good, why doesn't he let everybody go to heaven? Because then he wouldn't be a just God. The sin has to be atoned for. But because he's a good God, he paid for it himself. There was a cost, and it had to be paid for. But he sent his only son to pay that price. So this propitiation to take place, so that way you can be justified. You can be righteous in his sight. He's merciful, though, too. He's merciful in that he desires to have all sinners come to him. That's something that we forget to share sometimes. When we talk about the grace that is God, we talk about this free gift. We talk about this, but we don't talk about the mercy. See, the mercy is the time that you have here on the planet. In order to have time to find that grace, to have time to come to that realization of Jesus Christ, to come to salvation in that righteousness. Because if he wasn't merciful, as soon as you sin, you'd be a black spot or something, just boom, and gone. And that would be pretty immediate, wouldn't it? If you don't know that we're born sinful nature, man, you've never watched a 2-year-old, right? You just go babysit a 2-year-old for a little while. You'll know. You'll understand. And I often talk about babies, because I've delivered some in the field, and I think it's really funny. I just look at things a funny and different way sometimes, and I look at babies and everybody's, oh, they're precious, they're so good, there's whatever. No, man, what does that thing do the first moment it's out of the womb? What does it do? It starts to scream and cry. Yeah, granted, I'm rubbing on it trying to make it cry, but why is it crying? Why is it screaming out? Because it's uncomfortable. Because it's just been ripped away from the only thing it knew. Sometimes they just cry because they're hungry. That's selfishness, isn't it? I know that's weird to say, I know. That'll get me some emails later. I'm just showing a nature, though. We believe Jesus was perfect, lived a perfect life. He was a spotless lamb. There's a reason why we sing Silent Night when he was born. I know I'm being funny, but serious. So why was the cross necessary? Why did this all have to happen this way? Because God can't ignore the sin. Because of his justice, sin must be paid. Because of his mercy, he delayed the payment. Because of his grace, he paid it himself. We have this great exchange that happens at the cross. Jesus gets your sin and you get his righteousness. That's how this works. That's the justification. That's the moment. He was treated like you deserved, so that way you can be treated like he deserves. It's funny when I look at illustrations sometimes. I just find them in weird places. I just find it in weird places. Because when I look at this picture, this exchange, this thing that happens, it reminds me of my little dog, Howie. And I have two dogs. I have Ari. Most of y'all have met Ari. She's my service dog. She's chilling at the house right now. But we have another dog. He just showed up one day. He's a little mutt mix. He's a little border collie mix. He's just a happy little guy, man. He's awesome. Not a mean bone in his little body, man. He's just awesome. And he just showed up one day. He was playing with Ari a lot and just kind of hung around. He ended up being kind of the neighborhood dog, right? And we got used to him over a few months. And we actually, at first, we named him Panda because he kind of looks like one of those little red pandas, And it just, I don't know, just something temporary. But then the kid next door is like, no, we would call him Howie. So that, I don't know, it just stuck. So he looks like a Howie. So he's a Howie. I mean, he was a little rambunctious little creature, though. Like, sometimes he's a little rebellious sometimes, because he didn't want to stay in the yard. He doesn't want to stay where you want him to. He's a free spirit, right? I mean, even now, if he gets out of the fence, man, he's gone. He's like, I'm cruising. I got bushes to go visit, Got to mark my territory. But he would also go to the neighbors' houses, and they would complain because he would take some packages off the porch. If you left a Prime package out there, it's going to be Howie's. And he's going to drag it off in the yard, and he's going to play with a box. I mean, it's just going to happen. Or if you left slippers outside, man, they're going to be Howie's. So he's a little rambunctious, a little crazy like that, and some people got annoyed. And so one day, he just didn't show up that morning to play with Ari, and I was worried. I was like, man, I wonder where is the little guy. I was always afraid he was going to get hit because he would cross the road a lot. That's scary, That's always scary. I don't like that, He doesn't understand that fence is provision of my love, Like, I'm just trying to keep you safe. But no, he wants to run around, and we just kept going on, and Grace is like, oh, wait, no, I think I found him. I think I found him on the internet. And I was like, the internet? He started Facebook? Is he on TikTok? No, he was at the pound. He got picked up. Actually, he got surrendered by his owners that I guess they got so many complaints, his actual owners. And so he's at the pound, and I was like, man, I hate that. He's such a great dog. He's such a lovely dog. I want to give him a good home. So I was like, I'm going to go up there and get him. I'm going to go to the pound. I'm going to go get him. And so I go up to the Monroe pound up there, and I was like, hey, I'm here. I want to adopt a dog. I think he's my dog already, so I want him. He's mine. I just want him. And they bring him out of the back. That poor little guy, he's just shaking. He's just scared. He didn't like it there. He's too free spirit. He's like, he's just shaking. And I'm like, okay, I start filling out paperwork, and they're like, all right, that'll be, I don't remember what it was, $60 or whatever it was. I'm like, what? Like, I'm taking him off your hands. What do you mean he's $60? What do you, I mean, come on. It's not a pet store. $1,800. What are you trying to do out of me? Not really. I'm not really fussing about $60. But I had to pay a price for him. Isn't that amazing? I just see this correlation in this poor little guy. You know, just like God sees in us, we're just rambunctious little, mutts running around the neighborhood causing all sorts of little troubles and little problems here. And then when that problem comes to a head, when there's a price to be paid, God steps in and pays it. He pulls us out of the pound. And he pays that $60. Well, he pays a lot more. He pays with the blood of his own son. John 1:12 says, "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." Nothing how he did, really, to be brought into my family. But I brought him in. Happy to do so. God is happy to bring you into his family, for you to become children of God. Not just a friend, not just a fellowship of believers, children. You get to be called children of God. He paid that price. So now as Mr. Mel and Mr. Jerry come up to lead us in a song of invitation, this is your time. If you want to know more about how you can be in that family, if you can be a child of God, the altar is open. It's just a prayer away. If you have other needs that need to be met, if you have things going on in your life, if you have struggles, if you have other things, the altar is open for you to pray at. Lay them at the feet of Jesus. Lay them at the feet of God. He's a wonderful Father. He wants to hear it. If you're interested in joining the church, this is also a moment you can come up and talk to me about that, and we can work on that too. So let's stand. I'm going to pray, and then we'll sing. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this message spoke to you. If you like this video, hit that like button. Also, share it. If you want to see more, subscribe to our videos so that way you can catch any future upcoming content. If you're local to Winder, come join us 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings as we worship together, and on Wednesday evenings at 5:45 as we have dinner and a Bible study together. Thanks so much for watching. See you later.